Greetings and salutations everyone, TheBrandonBrownson here with another episode of Theory Addict. So in TBB Unscripted Episode 1, I asked you guys to pick between Pokemon and Portal, and you unanimously decided that you wanted to see Pokemon Part 2, so here it is. Before I get started, I just have a couple of things to say. First of all, unless I state otherwise, I did not come up with any of these theories, and I do not believe any of these theories. I found them while browsing the internet, and I thought they were interesting enough to share with y'all. Second, if any of you want to know what a specific song is that I use in the video, I will be listing them all in the credits of the video. Last, if you're gonna comment, please don't be a dick about it. If you have any evidence to support or disprove any of these theories, I invite you to leave them in the comment section below, but be respectful. With that said, let's jump right into it. In the post-game portion of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you get a large sum of background information about your rival, Silver, and what happened to Giovanni and Team Rocket between the events of the first generation and the second generation. The post-game ends with a climactic final battle against Giovanni at the same time as the Goldenrod radio tower situation. Yet, something about this situation chilled me to the bone. After Giovanni quite literally trembles from defeat, he leaves the cave. However, you don't hear the normal exit sound. Instead, you hear a splash, followed by dead silence. Giovanni's hideout was high up in the Toho Falls, and the entrance was directly next to Rapid Waters. Is it possible that he committed, or at the very least attempted to commit suicide? Another piece of evidence comes from the dialogue that comes afterward. You can hear Team Rocket still trying to contact Giovanni, one of them saying, "Where is Giovanni gone? I wonder if he's coming," as if to give you the impression that he's forever vanished. Right after this, Ethan says they keep on calling their boss. I feel sorry that they don't know he's not coming. Yet Giovanni never announced that he wasn't planning on still going to Goldenrod. Giovanni's actions were much more melodramatic than any other antagonist group leaders in the Pokemon world. Team Rocket committed actual crimes like burglary, slaughtering Pokemon, hostage standoffs, and kidnappings. Could he have had one final moment of severe guilt and decided to rid the world of himself? Now, normally, I don't address the evidence that goes against the theory. However, I think in this case I'm going to give it a try. The first piece of evidence going against the theory is that Giovanni used waterfall to get out of Toho Falls, and that's why there was a splash noise. The reason to disagree is that none of Giovanni's Pokemon are capable of using waterfall, or at least the ones he had at the time. And to get to his hideout, you had to go through the Kanto entrance, which had no need for the waterfall HM. Piece of evidence number 2, Giovanni dived and swam out. Reason to disagree: sharp rocks, high cliffs, probably wouldn't have gone too well for him. Piece of evidence number 3 is that Giovanni went to a secret island to enjoy his life with John Lennon, Jimi Hendrix, Tupac Shakur, and Michael Jackson. Okay, yeah, I can see that one, to be honest. When the mother Kangaskhan dies, it leaves its Kangaskhan cub on its own. The Kangaskhan cub uses the skull and the bone from its mother to use as protection and becomes a Cubone. Then, through malnutrition or adapting to a different lifestyle, the Cubone evolves into a Marowak. Female Marowaks later evolve into Kangaskhan's, and the cycle starts all over. This is self-evident, as Cubone appears rather similar to the baby Kangaskhan that rides around in its mother's pouch. Also, Bonemerang, Cubone's signature move, refers to Boomerang just as Kangaskhan refers to Kangaroo. Kangaroos and Boomerangs are both natively Australian themes. However, before the release of Pokemon Red and Blue, the developers decided that Kangaskhan needed to become its own standalone Pokemon. The reason for this is that, being a kid's game, it wouldn't really fly to allow small children to learn that a Cubone is actually an orphan baby Kangaskhan, wearing its dead mother's skull on its head and slinging its bones around like clubs and boomerangs. However, the developers didn't have time to delete the code at the last minute. Instead of deleting the code, they simply wrote a new, non-evolving Marowak and moved the old one to an empty slot, with no number. This catchable Pokemon is M, Missingno's sister. M is actually a scrap prototype of Marowak. This theory can be confirmed if you catch an M and level it up. Well, it evolves into a Kangaskhan. Now, I don't think that I've believed a single theory that I've discussed in any of these videos. That said, I think this one might be onto something. The evolution of a Cubone into a Marowak and a Kangaskhan looks like it would make sense, and if they decided to take it out in the last minute, it would explain the programming error that led to Missingno and M. Warning, this next theory is pretty damn creepy, so if creepypasta isn't your thing, now would be a good time to boogie. You have been warned. Remember that old man on a construction site in Vermilion City during the events of Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow? He and his faithful Machop were flattening the ground for some ambiguous construction project that they had been at for 3 years. What was it that they were trying to build? The story begins in Lavender Town. The Lavender Town chapter of the first generation Pokemon games was short, but it left an impact on the players. Team Rocket was at it again, stealing the skulls of the Cubones in the tower. Local celebrity Mr. Fuji attempted to stop them, but was easily subdued and taken hostage. You, the hero, rescued Mr. Fuji and put an end to Team Rocket's dastardly plans once more. The story was juvenile, but there seemed to be so much more to it. Perhaps it was the music that played, a tune that sounded like the 8-bit incarnation of fear itself. It added an ambiance and intensity that can be found nowhere else in the game, so it's no wonder that it's recalled with such vividness by those who were raised in that Pokemon era. But isn't it curious that, for a town so dedicated to preserving the resting place of Pokemon, just 3 years later the gravesite had been replaced by a radio tower? Lavender Town had obviously changed a great deal between Generations 1 and Generations 2. Aside from the physical changes, the music was now lighthearted and whimsical, entirely different in mood than the previous generation. But beneath that cheerful arrangement of music was the same haunting melody. Things were not as they appeared. You see, there was more to Team Rocket's involvement than you had ever imagined. Lavender Town, during the time of the first generation games, was a town without a draw. It lacked a Pokemon gym, and it lacked anything that would attract tourists. Fuchsia had a safari zone. Pewter had a museum, Cinnabar had its famous laboratory, and so on and so forth. Lavender Town was essentially a massive graveyard that was free to visit. Its feeble Pokemart paled in comparison to the huge Celadon department store that was a short travel through the underground path to the west. Lavender Town was easily the poorest town in all of Kanto. One day, a businessman approached the mayor of Lavender Town with a proposition. Radio was a fad that had taken Johto by storm. He proposed the demolition of the Pokemon Tower and the construction of a radio tower in its place. It would be entirely funded by the businessman's company, built at no cost to Lavender Town. The mayor realized that this would greatly upset the residents, but also realized that this was an opportunity for the much-needed prosperity to such a desperate little town. He accepted, even with the condition of the businessman's plans. What was that condition, you may ask? Cubones were indigenous to Pokemon Tower, and their skulls were extremely valuable on the black market. The businessman's condition was that his organization would be allowed to hunt the Cubones, the profits from the skull being what would fund the construction of the radio tower. At this point you may be asking, who was this businessman? And who was this mayor who would agree to such wretched terms? Well, the businessman was Giovanni, and the mayor? Well, that was none other than Mr. Fuji. Red was simply a pawn in the grand scheme of things. He rescued Mr. Fuji in order to deflect the growing suspicion of his involvement with Team Rocket. And as Red left town and continued his journey, Team Rocket quietly resumed with the extermination of the Cubones. The plan appears to be unconcerned with the souls of the resting Pokemon, but it was anything but. You see, Giovanni was a very superstitious man, and the takeover of the Sylph Company was done so that Team Rocket would be able to mass-produce Sylph Scopes, which would then be distributed to the grunts involved with Project Lavender. Giovanni also believed that demolishing the tower would disrupt the spirits of the Pokemon inside, so he planned to construct a new tower. The bodies would be moved there before the demolition of the tower would take place. He knew of a plot of land that would be perfect for the new tower, an empty hill in Vermilion City. Giovanni hired a small independent construction company to build the tower so that people would not suspect Team Rocket's involvement. The old man's company used a Pokemon labor force in the form of Machops. However, the construction was quite problematic. It suffered through a string of increasingly bizarre disasters. The funds originally given to the company to begin construction on the project were lost in a bank robbery. There were inexplicable machine failures, as well as the death of several Machops. Months passed and the project stalled, making no progress. The citizens of Vermilion, who had no idea what the construction was intended for, joked that it was cursed. This would explain the continuing tragedy that befell the Machops, whose attacks could not affect the spirits. Nonetheless, Giovanni refused to begin the construction of the radio tower until the bodies could be transferred to a new resting place. His greatest fear was disturbing the spirits. Some of his followers came to view him as delusional, and he seemed to believe that the ghosts were trying to communicate with him. that he had, in fact, disturbed the spirits already, causing their activity in Vermilion. His defeat by their Hands of Red, a simple 10-year-old boy, validated his apprehensions so that he could no longer lead an organization that expected him to carry out a plan that he now feared the consequences of. He relinquished his power over Team Rocket and disappeared. Needless to say, the new leaders of Team Rocket shared few of his superstitions or apprehensions, and the tower was demolished the next day. Strangely enough, the old man that owned the Vermilion Construction Company died that very same day. The construction site upon the hill remains in Vermilion City today as an abandoned, flat patch of earth, barren except for a few grave sites where the deceased Machops lay, the only feature that resembles the planned Pokemon Tower that never was. Those who visit the site claim to feel an uneasiness, and some even claim to hear a faint, sad melody. Most avoid this place, but on occasion a traveler from another region will unknowingly stumble upon it. They claim to see the old man and his Machop stomping that ground flat for an important construction project. Unfortunately, as creative as this theory is, it's pretty much disproven by the after-game events of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. That said, it was way too cool for me not to include in this episode. Well, we might have only tackled 3 theories in this episode, but I feel that the length of the last one should more than make up for that. I should have just enough material to make a part 3 sometime in the future, maybe even a part 4, but let's not get too carried away quite yet. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. But remember, if you leave a comment, don't be a dick. Also, be sure to check the links in the description, and be sure to join the Facebook fan group for Chameleon Couch Productions. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time. TheBrandonBrownson, signing out.